Welcome to the Top Producer Podcast with Farm CPA Paul Neefer. The Top Producer Podcast challenges farmers to think differently. Farm management, tax issues, policy implications, and more. Gain your competitive advantage on the Top Producer Podcast. The Top Producer Podcast is brought to you by the next generation of weed control, Liberty Ultra Herbicide from BASF. Learn more about the best Liberty yet at liberty-ultra.us. And by Durastack Trait Technology, the latest innovation from Syngenta. Available for the 2027 season, Durastack technology features 3 powerful modes of action to outsmart, outmaneuver, and outmatch corn rootworms every move.
Welcome, everyone, to the Top Producer Podcast. I'm Paul Neefer, your host, and today we're going to have a conversation with Chalmers Carr from South Carolina. How are things going?
Everything's going great. Kind of just like I said when we were talking earlier, but the weather, we just had a freeze for the first time this year, and then the sun is back out, and we're going to warm back up. But a little dry here in the South, but other than that, I think it's been one of the best falls. It's just been very mild, and everything has been very good. So we're wrapping up our fall crops and getting ready for the winter.
Yeah, here in the Denver area, we have not had snow. Typically, we have snow by about October 12th. This is November, 14th, and we still have not had any snow at all. And I think for the next week or more, we're not going to have snow. Now, likely that means we might have lower snowfall for the year, which is not something we're looking forward to, but nice thing about Denver, last year we had 3 feet of snow at my house, and 3 days later it was like 75 degrees and gone. So, it doesn't stick around too long typically. So now
we enjoy coming out skiing in your state, so I hope you do get the snow.
We'll probably get some. Well, the ski resorts are open because they can make their own snow a little bit. Now, for the listeners out there, whereabouts are you located in South Carolina?
We're located in Ridge Springs, South Carolina, a very small town halfway between Columbia, South Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. I guess you would call it the western part of the state. And we're just located in a community where about 80% of the state's peaches are grown, and just right on the ridge line of South Carolina where their coastal plain soils meet our Piedmont soils, and kind of got a nice elevation, a little microclimate here that allows for peaches to be grown. And that's primarily what we do as peaches.
Okay. Well, before we start talking about the farm operation, let's get your background, where you grew up, which maybe is in this area, if you went to college, and maybe what you did before you decided to be a farmer, or if that's something you always did from the very beginning.
No, I'm not your usual. I'm first generation farmer, but I'll tell you, I grew up in military. My dad was a military officer, moved all around. I was born in Thailand, did a stint in Alaska, a stint in Arizona, and Australia, and then I called Texas home. I went to high school in Texas, and then I came to Clemson University after not playing football any longer, and so I came to Clemson University here in South Carolina, which is where my dad went to, and studied agriculture economics. And I was actually going in the Air Force myself. My senior year, I had a pilot slot to go in the Air Force in 1990. And that's when the military did all their cutbacks, and they only took the academy graduates that year. And so lo and behold, I was actually going to go back to college and started getting my master's. And I had an opportunity to take over and run a farming operation in the eastern part of North Carolina. My background was I started working on my uncle's farm when I was 11 years of age. So every summer I was working. The first job I did was priming tobacco at 11 years of age. And I did that for 2 summers. And then I got into the peach orchards and started working there. And lo and behold, by the time I was 17, I was running the packing shed. And this was right around Ellerby, North Carolina. And got a lot of experience there. So worked my way through college doing that and going home every summer. And so I was kind of, like I said, my senior year, I graduated. I didn't really have plans. The gentleman I was working for in the eastern part of North Carolina offered me a farm management position. So instead of going back to college, I did that. And then my uncles approached me later that year and asked me to go to Florida and run a farm in Florida, the 2 uncles I worked for. And so I did that. And then 2 years later, I bought it. So at the age of 24, I bought my very first farm in Cherry Lake, Florida. Started peaches down there and started vegetables. Farmed there for a couple of years, and then wanted to get bigger, and knew peaches were not going to work in Florida. It's just, we're talking, this is 92, 93. And so There's a gentleman here in South Carolina who had no sons, and he was looking for his kind of retirement strategy. And so in '95, I came up to South Carolina. My wife stayed in Florida. I got married in '93. My wife stayed in Florida and ran the farm there. She was a teacher, but also worked on the farm and finished out that crop. And then I came here and worked here. Everything went well. And so I entered into an employment agreement with the gentleman, and it was saying I would work so long and then I'd have the opportunity to lease and buy the farm. And so in 1999, I executed a lease purchase agreement, and Titan Farms, which is the company I own and work at now right now, was born. So 27 years later, here we are.
Okay, okay.
And I know that's a lot, but
No, that's what we like to talk about. So, in I guess maybe just to have an idea, so you entered into the lease agreement in 1999. So that's roughly 25, 26 years ago. At that point in time, how big was Titan Farms, and then how has it grown over the last 25 years?
good question. So when I took it over in '99, it was 1,500 acres of peaches. When we executed the lease purchase agreement, it was 3,000 acres of land total. We were about 1,500 acres of peaches in the ground. The way the lease purchase agreement worked is during the first 3 years, all the money made would have gone into escrow. And of course, it was a pretty thick contract that we had to live by. And
Yeah.
my wife took pennies to live on. And
Yeah.
we were fortunate enough to have some years in there where we were escrowing some money. And so what the owner did is he said, if you made a profit, he would let me spend X number of dollars on it. And then the rest of it would go into the escrow account for the down purchase. And so we did that, and we started growing the farm, and we've grown the farm ever since. Probably the first 15 years, we were very ambitious in our growing, and we really concentrated on growing the acreage. And then from there, we started adding more infrastructure. We kind of outgrew ourselves. We went from 1,500 acres to over 5,000 acres in a little over 15, 16 years. And we didn't build up the support office all the way around. So whether it was personnel support or infrastructure
Yeah.
support. So 2012, 13, 14, we started making some real big expenditures and growing the support operation. And so today we're a little over 6,000 acres of peaches. We're the largest on the East Coast. We're growing about 750 acres of vegetables. We are not only a fresh packer, but we built a processing plant in 2015. So we also freeze peaches and make purees. We do vegetables as well. We've become a co-packer. We've added our own sales team. So you could say we're completely vertically integrated. And it's not a small operation anymore.
No,
We have
no.
82 full-time employees, and we employ about 950 seasonal H2A workers.
Now, when would be the peak season? Is that harvest? Is it thinning? Is it pruning? Or I mean, I'm just
No,
curious
see,
when.
harvesting and packing is the peak season, and the busiest month for us is July, but it ramps up. We start broccoli is one of our vegetable crops. We'll start broccoli right around the end of April, and so that starts off our season. And we start peaches about a couple weeks after that in May. Then bell pepper starts in June, right about the time broccoli ends. Broccoli ends about the first week in June. Bell pepper start about the first week in June. So now we're doing bell pepper, eggplant, and peaches all together, packing those and harvesting those. That goes on all summer long till pepper ends about the end of July, eggplant as well. Then we're planting the fall crops. We're still harvesting and packing peaches all the way to 1st of September. We have about a 2-week gap in September where we're not harvesting anything, and then bell pepper starts back, eggplant starts back, and then broccoli starts back. So we went from harvesting something about 15, 16 weeks a year to now we're harvesting something about 36 weeks a year. And then the processing operation is pretty much running year round. They have a little bit of downtime from October to, I would say, well, we're always running, but we're processing up until October, and then we'll start back with strawberries about February. So, just to, built it up over time, processing plants, they're celebrating their 10th year. It's Palmetto Processing Solutions, and this is their 10th year of doing that. And then we added a co-packing operation called Palmetto Elite Pack, where we actually co-pack frozen IQF smoothie mixes for companies.
No, no,
And so put it in poly bags, and you'll see those in, Costco and other places. And it's not our labels, but we're packing for other people, and kind of using that dynamic where one of our partners is on the West Coast, and it's easier to ship the raw ingredients here, pack them here, and then put them in final destination. So that's kind of
This
been a nice little add-on for us. And then just 2 years ago, we actually added something a little bit different. Sarah's Farm Adventure. It is a ag tourism place. You know, the corn maze and all
Yeah.
of that. Run that seasonally, and we're right in the middle of that. We're switching over from fall Halloween season to Christmas season. And last year, our first year in business, we had about 65,000 visitors. And this year, we're hoping for about 75,000 visitors. And we took over the food and beverage this year as well. So that's another exciting thing that you've never done before. And you get out there and you figure it out as you go.
Now, I'm guessing that when you're harvesting peaches or any of these well, let's start with peaches. Is that all pure hand harvest, or is there any mechanized equipment yet?
No, it is. It's all hand harvest. And that's why I said when we have 950 H2As, about 475 of them are in the field. So right now, everything is being done to a peach tree by hand. So pruning is by hand. We do pruning in the winter. So our workers come in right about the first of February. And I'll explain a little bit more about H2A later, but our workers come in the 1st of February. We've got to prune by hand about 680,000 trees. That takes us about 3 months or 12 weeks. And then you go right into thinning. So thinning is usually late March, all of April, and first part of May. And for those of the audience out there that know, sometimes a peach tree will put 10 times more fruit on a tree that it could actually make. And so
Yeah.
we have to remove those. There are shakers that do that, but they're not selective enough. So we do a combination of hand thinning, and then we also take wiffle ball bats and just go out there and tap them, and try to get some of them knocked off, and then we come back by hand and separate those up. That's probably one of the most intense jobs we do because the timing of that is so important. The thinning sets up your fruit quality and also your size, so that's very important. Now, that's of course if Mother Nature hasn't given you a frost or a freeze
Yeah,
and
yeah.
or any other things that can mess in, lack of pollination or a mild winter. So there's a lot of challenges. And then you go into harvesting. So hopefully you're done thinning when you start harvesting, and harvesting when you've got as multiple crops as we do. Harvesting is an all-day process, 7 days a week. That's what people don't know. When we start back in February, we're 7 days a week.
Yeah.
We try to take off Sunday afternoons, but on a farm this size, there's always something to be done. So anyway, we go pretty hard all the way till the fall, and then we're talking in probably one of our most down periods. It's November,
well-
December.
Well, good, good. Now, apple trees are sort of alternate bearing. They'll have a big crop and then a wider crop. Are peaches the same, or?
No, peaches are not alternate bearing. I've had one or two varieties that seem to have alternate bearing characteristics, and those are mostly my late varieties that you harvest late August, and they've got their crop still on the tree when they're setting the buds for next year. But no, they're not alternate bearing at all. So we can have back-to-back crops. We haven't had a full crop in quite some time because it just seems to be a number of things that have happened. But it's nothing impossible to have back-to-back full crops and everything.
And then over on the vegetable side, so you're growing different types of vegetables. Are any of those mechanized harvests, or is that all hand?
No,
done
all
too?
hand too. And let me back up to the mechanization on peaches. So I just spent a pretty good trip over into Europe. I went to Spain and Italy, and Spain's actually the third largest peach growing country in the world. US used to be number 3. We're now number 7. But so Spain, and they have really adapted to kind of like the apples, the trellis type system, where mechanization is gonna work for them a lot quicker. They already got some thinners out there and working with some robotics on harvesting. You've seen the drone harvest and stuff. So we're definitely exploring that. There's a lot of reasons why: pressure on land, cost of land, but also labor, of course.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen anything. I've watched the strawberry industry look at mechanization for many, many years, and it's just difficult, especially with what we call a three-dimensional tree, which is an open center tree. So getting them in a harvest wall. So we're actually starting to experiment with that on the farm and seeing how we could adapt to that, and where you build just a vertical platform wall, and it'll allow them, you can either harvest on some, platforms, so some people can be on the ground and some people can be riding on trailer. And I think that is going to be the future at some point in time, but it's not going to be a quick adaptation, as you can
Yeah,
imagine, when you're dealing with a permanent crop that lasts 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course, I grew up in Washington State, and you're right out there. A lot of the new plantings are all in nice trellis, and
Yep.
but you're going to spend 60 or $100,000 an acre putting in that
Yeah,
crop.
your
So
investment is quite a bit more, but your tonnage, according to what I saw in Spain, they're getting about 3 times the yield. So yes, it's 3 to 4 times the cost, but they're getting the yields in sooner and they're getting higher yields. I think the bigger question is are they going to live as long?
yeah,
Managing a harvest wall and but it was a unique experience, and I treasure that trip, and I advise anybody that's in this industry. I One of my successes to building this farm is I was fortunate enough to go travel and see how other people did it. I didn't have parents or grandparents saying this is the way it was done, so I never had that, "This is the way we're gonna do it because this is the way we've always done it." So I've been pretty quick to adapt and look at new things.
now I know again over on the apple side, they're having some issues right now because you have Honeycrisp that's done well, but it's a finicky fruit. They brought in Cosmic Crisp. You got all these varieties. Whereas my perception, and you're going to tell me I'm probably wrong, but my perception, a peach is a peach. I mean, I did typically don't. Hey, I'm not going to go for a Honeycrisp peach. I'm just going to Costco to get my flat of peaches. Is that true
No,
or
you're exactly right. And the reason being is peaches only last for 2 weeks, and their shelf storage that we don't have controlled atmospheric storage where you can have a Honeycrisp apple all year long. So if you go buy a variety of peach and you like that variety, then most likely by the time you go back to the store, that variety is not there. So no, we market peaches by yellow peaches, white peaches, and eastern or western peaches, but you're actually talking to the one company that has developed a brand, and it's called the Lorian brand. And so Lorian brand is named after my wife. And it's not one variety of peaches, it's 9 varieties of peaches that all have similar characteristics. But what we're after there is a flavor experience. So that if you're getting a Lorian peach, it's a premium peach. It's always going to have a consistent flavor, and that's been the biggest problem with peaches is people
yeah,
complain about the inconsistency in taste. So
yeah,
12 years ago, we developed the Laurier peach. It's now the number 1 peach in Wegmans grocery store. So if you know Wegmans up in the
mm,
Northeast,
yeah,
they're considered to be the gold star in the
yeah,
industry.
yeah.
Lunds, Byerly's, and Minneapolis area central markets, which is one of the HEB central markets down in Texas, huge stores, Rouse's down in New Orleans. So we've got several partners on that peach, and it has done phenomenally well year over year, 10, 12% growth with our partners on it. So something that people want and can gravitate to. And so we've actually put a brand out there that people can recognize.
Well, bring it to Colorado because when I go to the store, sometimes I'll bite into the peach. I go, and then other time, oh wow! But you just don't know what you're going to get when you bite into it. So
No, you don't, and that is the difficult thing about it, and it's also just the retailers in general, as we have 35, 40 retail partners, everybody does it different. We have our favorites, of course, and, it's really a struggling industry. There's so many other items for the people to choose from, and again, yes, inconsistency or slowdown, the best peach is a peach right off the tree, there's no doubt
yeah,
about it. The
yeah.
supply chain is what can really ruin us.
Now you had mentioned that you're sort of doing a smoothie powder type thing where the raw material is coming from the West Coast over to you. You're then packing it. Is that because, again, I grew up on the West Coast. Our minimum wage in Washington State now is approaching $20 an hour, and that's for
Yeah.
ag everybody. Whereas I'm guessing in South Carolina, it's still maybe $7 an hour,
Oh, no, well,
$8.
our federal minimum wage is $7, but I mean, our H-2H wages last year was 16.08. So
Well, yeah,
when you look at that, and then you put free housing and free transportation on it, our labor cost is almost the same. And I know that because I work with many different groups and associations across the country and have been an advocate for farm labor and everything. Now, I'll share with you later, there is some changes on that. But so the reason why is when COVID hit, it really put an understanding that we have a distribution problem in this country. So on the smoothie mix we're doing is mostly organic. So most of it is coming out of South America, and so it's cheaper to ship into the eastern ports. So we're coming into Charleston or into Savannah from the South America instead of going all the way around and then going into California. And then so that was part of it. And then the distribution model, as we saw diesel fuel prices go up and transportation go up. Once you're shipping, the most expensive thing you can do is ship a finished product because you have all the packaging and
yeah,
everything else.
yeah.
So a company out in California called Wawona Frozen, Started working with them 2012. I used them as an advisor on helping me build my processing plant in 2014. And then in 2020, we made the agreement to build a freezer and a packing operation for him. And now we pack for several other major companies, Nature Right being one of them, Seal of the Seasons. And so we're really good at packing and doing things like that. And so it's their product, but we bring in and they buy the ingredients, they ship them into us. We now have freezer storage. I can hold 13,500 pallets, which I think is a little over 600 tractor trailer loads of frozen product. I've got 2.5 acres of freezer storage that I've built in the last 5 years. So, that's been, and that was driven again because COVID, because we found out there was definitely a freezer shortage in this country, and we couldn't rely on the freezers outside, so we decided we had to build our own.
Yeah, yeah, no, that good old freezers. I actually in my well, back when I was at CLA, we had a client that had freezer storage in Washington State, and that was a very interesting process. It does require a lot of electricity. I can tell you that. So
It does, and that so we have advantages on the East Coast where our power is a little bit more stable, a little bit cheaper than it is out west, and a few other
yeah,
things. Plus,
yeah,
we don't have all the regulations, so we're able to do things a little bit quicker. Not that we don't have any, but it's just we're in a much more friendly environment, business friendly environment over here. So we've been able to grow and expand, and luckily we've had a lot of good luck and good fortune along the way. My wife and I have been dedicated. Any dollars we've ever made, we've invested it right back in the business, and we're the true definition of just like most of your listeners. We're asset rich and cash poor, but we're farmers and we love it every day.
yeah, yeah. If you were cash rich, then you wouldn't be a true farmer. So
No, you would not be a tree farmer. That's exactly right.
well, on that note, let's go ahead and take a quick break for a sponsor message, and then we'll come back and discuss H2A and a few other things.
With corn rootworm costing farmers up to $1 billion a year, you need the right strategy. Introducing Durastack trait technology, featuring 3 powerful modes of action to strike corn rootworm at full force, outsmart, outmaneuver, and outmatch their every move with the industry's first triple BT protein stack built for corn rootworm control. Take back your yield potential. Make your move at Durastack.com. Available for the 2027 season.
My dad has a solution for everything, whether it's some obscure tool in his toolbox or Liberty herbicide to deal with tough weeds. Now I'm continuing what he started by using Liberty Ultra herbicide from BASF, the best Liberty yet. It delivers 20% better weed control than generics thanks to its Liberty Lock formulation, and it's got easier handling too. So thanks, Dad, for teaching me to use Liberty Ultra herbicide. It's nice to know that good weed control decisions run in our family. Always read and follow label directions.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Top Producer Podcast. I'm Paul Neef, your host, and we're going to rejoin our conversation with Chalmers Carr from South Carolina. So, we touched a couple times on H2A, but just for the listeners out there, can you sort of explain what the H2A process is and why it's important for your operation and other operations like yours?
I'll be glad to. So let's understand agriculture, especially labor dependent agriculture, has struggled for quite a long time. And when I say that, I've been involved in this for 25, 30 years now. But so in 1986, they created a program called the H2A program, which is the Agriculture Guest Worker Program that allowed for American farms to bring in foreign workers legally if they could prove that they didn't have a domestic workforce available, willing, and able to do the job. The program started in '86, mostly being driven by the tobacco industry in North Carolina, and it kind of just sat there. It started out with probably a couple thousand workers. I got probably from 1995 to 2005, it hovered somewhere around 30,000 workers. Then it slowly ticked up, and in 2011, 12, it was 60,000 workers coming in. Well, what was important to this is we'd already gone through 9/11. We'd had a tightening of the border. Our immigration policy was changing, and our federal government, the last immigration bill passed by our federal government was in 1996.
Yeah.
And that was only to change basically to change the I-9 form and do a few other border security things. And then, so all of a sudden we had a situation where there was a lot of undocumented illegal workers in this industry coming across the border. But now the border was getting tougher. People weren't able to go back home and see their families, so they were having to make a choice to stay here as long as they possibly could, and then they would basically exit the workforce, and that started happening about 2010. So we actually had a period of some reverse migration in the late 2015 to 20, when Trump's first administration came in. Border security was very tough. So the long and short of that is from 2013 to 2025, this program has gone from 50,000 workers to 375,000 workers coming in. And the reason for that is because we do not have our younger generations, our American born, are not wanting to do these jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, they are hard physical jobs and they're mostly in rural areas and stuff like that. But there's also not that domestic, I mean, that illegal workforce is no longer there. And yes, I mean, I talk to people all the time when they were complaining about under the previous administration, the Biden administration, we had an open border and it seemed like everybody was coming in and, but those people weren't coming to farms anymore. They were going straight to the cities.
Yeah.
So you saw a lot of growth in the H-2A program, but it wasn't because it got easier. It was just because it was the last resource. If you were going to stay in agriculture and you needed labor, you had to adapt to this program. Unfortunately, the program hasn't had any legislative changes to it either since it was adopted, and everything that's been done to it has been through regulations by administration. So, been a strong advocate for over 20 years. I've testified before Congress on this. The biggest problem has been the wage rate. You mentioned earlier the California wage rate, and states did. Washington State and California both had their state minimum wages raised up quite a bit. There's 23 states in this country that have state minimum wages higher than the federal minimum wage, but there are a lot of states that still rely on the federal minimum wage, even though that is not the wage we pay. So what has happened in the last 5 years, and it was driven by, again, the previous administration, is we've seen the H-2A wages across this country in 5 years go up 37%.
Yeah.
Ours in South Carolina have gone up 39%. 1 year, we got a 15% increase in 1 year. That is just unpredictable, too hard to plan for, especially with permanent crop like I grow, but it's not fair to the industry. I mean, when CPI and ECI, which is the employment cost index, has been averaging about 2.8, yet here we've been averaging over 7-8%. That's why food prices are the way they are. This is why people are getting out of agriculture. This is why people are moving their farms over to foreign countries and moving them outside our borders and stuff like that. And it's made it very difficult to compete. Luckily, in peaches, we don't have a lot of pressure from foreign competition. We do a little bit from Canada, not very much out of Mexico. But on the vegetable side of it, many of especially your southeastern farmers, and you're even up into Michigan, the open border we have with Mexico and Canada has put us at a severe disadvantage. The 950 workers I bring in every year come from Mexico. Their average wage per hour in Mexico is $1.72, and yet they're making $16.08 here in South Carolina with free housing and free transportation.
Yeah.
It is difficult to compete against $2 an hour labor in Mexico growing bell pepper. That's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
Yeah.
So we've got not only do we have some immigration work to do, but we have some trade issue work to do. The USMCA deal left out.
Now, I think there's been some changes on the H-2A wage side, or
There has,
just recently.
Let me go back and didn't answer your first question. So the H-2A program was created, and what it allows for do is seasonal operations, not year round, that have a seasonal need up to 10 months. So you can have a need for 2 weeks, but up to 10 months to allow you to bring in workers. You'll file a contract. Most everybody's using an agent to do that or a lawyer. You file a contract, the worker comes in, it's specified wage rates. You have to have your housing approved. Everything in job order's got to be there. And you bring those workers in and they work for a specified time. And then generally they go back home. They're allowed to stay in the country and look for another job, but generally they go back home. We have kind of developed this. We've been doing it for 27 years. And we started out with 175. And like I said, this year it's 950. But it is a lot of rules and regulations. It is a very difficult process. Just the application, you cannot start any more than 75 days before your date of need, but no less than 60 days before your date of need. Well, if we were that good at knowing exactly when our crops were going to start and everything, that would be really good. But Mother Nature has a big way of influencing those things. So the government doesn't realize some of these things that they put in place. And it's also handled by 5 different agencies touch this program, 1 state agency and 4 federal agencies. And so it's a complicated mess.
Yeah.
But again, it's the only way to get legal labor and everything. So we've been working on that. But that's it in a nutshell. The biggest problems with it have been the wage rate. The second problem has been it's only for temporary or seasonal labor. So your dairy industry can't use it. Year-round operations that have diversified, such as myself, run into problems of using it year-round and everything. And so it needs some real adoption to it. Now, you asked about some recent changes. We finally have some positive changes. Um, the problem is they've been done through regulations, and regulations can be undone by another administration. So,
Right.
to back up, the Bush administration in 2008 gave us a really good relief in the program by lowering the wage rate, making the application very much easier to use in the process. And so that was right at a crucial time when, again, the domestic workforce was declining, and so H2A was growing. And then the next administration, the Obama administration, not only came in immediately and undid those regulations, but actually went further back and made it harder. So we live with that. And then during the current previous administration, I think I testified or told somebody earlier that during his administration, he passed over 3,000 pages of regulations against the H2A program, 5 big rule changes that made it even much harder to use. And so we were living under that era. And then just here recently, President Trump did a rule change, and it's an interim final rule. And he did it the day before the government shutdown. And this is going to be pretty impactful because it not only lowers the wage rate and allowed for staggered entry, which makes it easier, but he's also allowing for a housing deduction. And housing costs have been one of the biggest problems. Providing free housing is very, very difficult. So these are very positive. The comment period is going to be open to December 1st. So I encourage people to make comments on this. And, there's still, because the government's been shut down to yesterday, there's been a lot of questions. They made a rule and then the government shut down. And
Yeah.
sometimes you need interpretation of what the rule really says. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we're excited about it. In South Carolina, our wage rate will go from 1608 to $12.14. And then we're going to get a housing deduction, I think, of $1.60 or some. So we're actually $1.54. So our wage rate would be 1060. Now, let's face it, we're not going to take our workers back from 1608 to
Yeah.
1060.
Yeah.
But what I did on my farm is I went back to 2007, right before the Bush changes came in, and I applied a 3.1% index to that, which is above the ECI, and basically got us to 13 and 26. It would have been $13. I think that's a fair wage rate to go out to. That is what we've been communicating to our workers that are all either have gone home or in the process of going home. We had a bunch of town halls here on the farm to talk about it because it is a huge change to them. But again, some of the best advice I got from some of my most career workers coming from Mexico was, listen, it's still much better than what
Yeah.
we're going to do at home.
Yeah.
And we're coming back and we understand. And so they appreciated that because I was open and honest with them, talking to them about, hey guys, this thing keeps going up. I can't stay in this business. And it was getting very hard to compete. And to be honest with you, 25 is going to end up being one of our worst financial years for a number of reasons, but our labor cost is the biggest driver in that.
Yeah.
And so we needed some relief.
Now, on the housing side, what type of housing are you providing for them? Is it sort of like dormitory style or what?
Yes. So I have 2 different styles of housing. Since I've grown so much, I've built about 10 different housing units, but there are 2 different styles. I have one that is like a Motel 6 where there's 2 men to a room. They have everything in their own room, bath and shower and everything. And then they share a kitchen. So if you think about the old motel style with the doors opening up the outside, but
Yeah.
they have their room, their sink, their shower in there. And then it's a duplex. So there's 8 rooms on the front of the building and 8 on the back, holding 16 people each side. And in the middle on each side is a kitchen that they all share. So that has been our most popular one because the other ones are 4 men to a room, 16 to a side, and they share a kitchen there. But then I have some of the ones I inherited when I bought the farm that are more 8 people to a room, game showers. When I say, your old type of high school shower, everybody gets in there. And we still have some of those legacy ones. We've improved them. We put air conditioner and everything. But I will tell you that, and there's nicer ones in California, but here on the East Coast, I probably have some of the nicer labor camps and taking care of our workers. I've grown my business and I have about a 95% return rate with my HCA workers. And it's because we care about the worker. we've extended our job contract. We learned that if they could be here about 8 months, they didn't have to go back home and work. And so they became dependent on us just as we became dependent on them.
Yeah.
And that's been a win-win for us. And we did that. We partnered with a couple of nursery operations so our ladies can come in and work in the nurseries when we don't have packing jobs to do and get them 7, 8 months of work a year. And that's been a win-win for everybody. And
Now,
to go in and add to, so just for some of your people who are going to ask, well, what about American workers and why aren't you, hiring them? So I live in a town of 678. I employ not house 975. So I'm bigger zip code than my town is. But here's the real point of that is we have to advertise these jobs. We're advertising $16.08. Last year, I got 3 U.S. workers to apply for the jobs.
Yeah.
That just happens to be the same 3 U.S. workers that work. So we just don't have people willing to do these jobs. And so
Yeah.
without this program, companies like mine and others would not be able to survive. You mentioned Washington State. Washington State apples is 90% harvested by H-2A workers.
Yeah.
I know that industry very well. Got good friends up there.
Yeah, no, it's a tough business right now up there. So
It
and
is.
it's not just labor related. I mean, there's
No,
other
it's a little
issues.
oversupply and the
Yeah.
variety thing, and
Yeah,
and then of
yeah.
course the trade war with China and again just different things going on with trade has made it difficult for industries. And
Yeah,
this
yeah.
year the trade policies with Canada retaliated and put a 25% tariff on stone fruit grown domestically in the U.S. to go into Canada. So
Yeah.
we didn't have a tariff on their products, but yet they put a tariff on ours.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. Well, let's dive a little bit into crop insurance. I mean, most of the listeners on here, they're very familiar with crop insurance on row crops. I mean,
Right.
corn, soybeans, hey, I got 85% or whatever. But over on the permanent crop side, crop insurance can be a little bit different. You got a whole farm, maybe you have to restructure and have entities and so on. So I'm just curious, in your situation, how crop insurance maybe has helped you, what you'd still like to see changes on that side. So let's just have a discussion on that.
Be glad to. And I would tell your listeners right now, I would not be in business if it wasn't for crop insurance. I can tell you verbatim, I mean, 2007, I lost 90% of the crop. 2017, I had a 90% crop loss. And then fortunately, back in 23, we lost about 87%, which at that point in time, we were 5,000 acres in production. And that was, I've said it before many a time, it was about a $30 million night for us in revenue. So, one, today in today's farming, you cannot borrow money without crop insurance.
Right.
So we started understanding it very well. Early on, I had a mentor, somebody that I wasn't from South Carolina. I moved here, and as I was a farm manager, those first years before I leased the farm, the gentleman did not have crop insurance. And so in 95, I made a plan. So in 96, I took out crop insurance for him for the very first time, working with this gentleman, Mr. Ray Fleming, who owned Midland Agency. And Mr. Ray was probably in his late 60s or 70s there and took a liking to me. And remember, I was an outsider and the owner of the business didn't like crop insurance. He didn't really understand it, but I knew that if I was ever going to take over the farm, I'd have to have it. So started working with it then and just kind of grew into it. And lo and behold, though, in 96, we had a freeze. And so we actually received a crop insurance payment. My owner was very happy about that. And so it's kind of one of those lessons learned. But, so you have crop insurance because of those disastrous years that are going to happen. We know they're going to happen, especially in a crop that I grow. But what I also learned is you're always going to have something go wrong. When you deal with peaches in particular, it can be, as we've seen, warmer winters happen, so we don't get enough dormancy. That can affect certain varieties. You've got warmer springs, so you're blooming earlier, and some varieties get frosted out while other ones don't. So I learned very early on that you needed to have unit structure where you tried to have as many units as you could. You try to put your varieties into your units the way you can structure them by risk profile. So it could be freeze, it could be disease pressure, it could be a mild winter pressure. So there's a number of things in there that you can look at and doing. And then started playing with the coverage rates. Now, row crop, I mean, no crop insurance is inexpensive, but I can tell you on specialty crops, it's very expensive.
Yes.
So, my premiums are quite a bit higher. So when most people were taking out 50% coverage levels, I started saying, wait a second, let's understand this. And we actually take the 70, 75% coverage levels, depending on what counties and everything else like that. The reason for that, and I try to educate and try to counsel farmers around me and stuff. Your trigger is that percentage loss. So if you're 50% coverage, you have to have a 50% loss before you ever get a coverage. But there's often you're going to have 25 to 30% damage.
Yep.
And so then you start getting a trigger and you start getting repayment, which will help you pay for those premiums. So again, it's not something that you put into making profit off of or anything else. But what I've learned is the higher coverage levels you can take. So now the SCO coverage is very important. It just so happens at 23, I had SCO coverage and it paid off, and that was huge for us. Um, Although the problem with SCO coverage is it doesn't come in until the next year.
Right.
And so
Right. You got a year delay. Yeah.
you got a year, you're trying to tell your bankers and everything it's coming, but you have no documentation of that because they do have to wait to see the county averages and stuff.
Yeah.
But crop insurance, I am proud to see what they've done in the big, beautiful bill, making crop insurance the real safety net for agriculture.
Yeah.
I know the row crop producers really needed it from reference pricings and everything else, but we needed it in general. So the subsidies are, and I hate the word subsidies and coming from the South where, everybody down here is very conservative and
Yeah.
we've got everything from the Tea Party to this, that, and the other. You say the word subsidy and they immediately get just turned off. I wish we could change that in crop insurance. If there's one thing I would ask all these professionals out there, let's change the word subsidy. But anyway, we do a good job of trying to educate our legislatures on that they're not really subsidizing it. We're paying for our crop insurance. Just for your listeners out there, my annual premium myself is over $5 million. That is what my premium is. So it is expensive, but at the same token, it couldn't be in business without it. And generally, I'll get half my premium back because there's going to be some type of damage, but it's there for those years where you like 23, where I would not be in business today if it wasn't for that. So, things I think we could do. The whole farm has been difficult, especially if you're growing your business, because it's a look back on an average, and then it wouldn't cover operations like mine. It used to have a 10 or $12 million cap on it. And so that wouldn't cover my operation. And I want your listeners to understand, this is a family operation. My wife and I started this, and I have multiple families working for me. My kids aren't in the business, but I have young men and women have been with me 20 years, and their families are here, and their families are living off of this. So we're a family operation. We've just grown it into a big operation.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to say big is better, but that's what we've done. And then we've diversified with our vertical integration to help that. But I would say crop insurance has been without a doubt has been our savior and has allowed us to, our lenders understand it. It's taken a while to get them to understand it, but they understand it. And so they consider our risk profile to be a lot less now than they did early on.
Yeah. Well, and certainly being a CPA, the whole farm, anytime you're dealing with tax returns and, you look at the claim thing, it's like you got 17 what ifs almost. It's okay, you got this now. Okay, you got it back in last year, subtract out next year, blah, 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 blah. It's just a nightmare at times. I mean, I understand why it's there, but certainly in your case, in order to take advantage of the whole farm, you'd have to restructure everything. And again, it doesn't work well if you're growing rapidly.
No, it doesn't. And so just having the individual units and having people understand the individual units. So some of the changes they've made where, non-contiguous tracks, and if there was a road intersecting, that became a different unit. But it's also being a smart farmer and looking at where you plant and why you plant there and what varieties you put there and into those units and everything else like that. So I do a lot of planning with crop insurance in mind. So if we're going into a crop that you're going to live with for 12 to 15 years, you better be putting, not only you want to make sure your soil is right and everything's perfect there, but there's a whole business plan that goes with it, and crop insurance is part of that business plan.
Well, and I'm guessing, labor would be your number one cost, but crop insurance premiums might be top 5, I would guess.
They're definitely top 5. In fact, it's probably number 3. Packaging usually comes in number 2, and then crop insurance is going to be number 3, and then chemicals and fertilizer, right behind that. So, they're top 5, and just like in anything, the top 5 account for probably 60 to 75% of your expenses. Labor, in my case, is usually right at 35 to 40%. So that's a big one. And so when you were getting 7% increases, or that one year where we had 15% increase,
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
automatically
that's
adds a
tough.
cost to growing something. So, um,
Well, good. We're getting toward the end. I always have my 4 key questions I like to ask. So, first, who was your mentor in this process?
oh, well, there's been several along the way, but my father, I would have to say one, and that's going to be odd because I hired him in 2019, I mean, excuse me, 1999. I hired him after 40 years. He was 30 years in the Air Force and 10 years in the private sector. And he came in and ran my first strategic meeting for me. And he ran my packing shed from 99 to 2014. But leadership and just overall strategy was a great mentor. I had a marketing consultant who unfortunately no longer with us, that helped me create the Lorianne Peach program. Became a mentor and friend on helping me market because I'm not a salesperson. And you're talking now, we have brands and going to
Yeah.
retailers.
Yeah.
And then I actually have a crop consultant, an agronomist out of North Carolina that's been a great mentor because I was not a farmer. To all the people on here, I learned farming after I bought a farm. I was a
Yeah.
packer. I could harvest. I knew everything about being in the orchards, but actually planting and growing something, which is now my real passion,
Yeah.
I learned that last. So
Yeah.
I went about it a little bit different.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. Now, I could guess what your answer is going to be, but I'm just going to ask you, do you have time for any hobbies?
No, no.
That was going to be
I
my guess. So,
I do hunt a little bit in the fall of the year. In fact, I'm fixing to take my farm managers tomorrow, and we go to an annual trip up to Illinois, and we've got some land that we go up there. But if you call that a hobby, but no, don't even play golf or anything like that. It's been my biggest
business is your
joy.
hobby. Yeah.
This is my hobby. I coached high school football up until 2013, and that was a fun and that was a hobby, and it was just volunteer, but I did well, but it just got to be the farm got to be too big and couldn't do that anymore.
So, what position did you play in
I played
high school?
quarterback, and then I
Yeah.
was actually became a head coach at a small private school, and I'm fortunate enough to have 5 state championship rings sitting over there, and so,
Yeah.
and still the young man that I named president of my company played for me in high school. So, this past year, I named a 34-year-old, Mike Ross Williams, as president of Titan Farms, and so I now serve as a CEO role and, a mentor role for the rest of the young, employees we've got, but, it was definitely time to get new leadership and everything
Yeah.
else. So
Yeah. Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
there's always things that keep you up at night. And when you have as many employees as I do and everything, I would always say the safety and wellness of my employees is always part of it. And you absolutely never want to go to work and have somebody get hurt or injured or killed. And but it's life and things do happen. And we've
Yeah.
had a couple things. So it's always worried about your employees and everything.
Yeah. No, I know. I was a part owner of a plastic packaging company. We only had at the peak maybe 300 employees, but we had. I don't think we ever had any employees get killed during work. And I mean, we're dealing with heavy type equipment, but we had actually 2 workers commit suicide. It's just one of those things, and you have to deal with it. So, and finally, what's your definition of success in farming?
I read that question earlier, and I would really stump myself on it, and I'm going to give you a two-prong answer, but you know, growing. So when you look at farming, growing, whether it's growing a crop, and I love the vegetable side because I plant it and you can see it grow right away. Tree, you invest a lot of time into, but growing people is really my success. To have the young men and women here, and it could be the H2A women, or it could be the young people I hire out of college. My farm manager started working here when he was 15 years of age. He is VP of farming operations, or now COO of farming operations. And to see his career just go, and he's president of organizations, and just absolutely the opportunity to see people go. We got a young lady who has been packing shed director and now going to lead our sustainability initiative. So growing people is just important to me as growing crops. And so success is growing, and growing can mean a lot of different ways.
Well,
Now, obviously, you got to have financial success along the way too.
yeah,
But
yeah.
to me, it's more about the growth and the people you've got, and then producing that beautiful crop. And my favorite thing is, I get to ride around and taste peaches every day, and everyone is the next best one you've ever had.
Well, again, if you do a good job of growing people, you're going to make money. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the reality. If you don't do a good job, you're probably not gonna make money, so.
Yeah, and I get in on row crop operations, and I got many friends that grow row crops, but they family operations, maybe 1 or 2 outside employees and stuff. I mean, this operation is built on a lot of different people coming in here and
Yeah.
jumping in, and we work some very long hours. So
Yeah.
having people, one of my biggest successes is empowering them and get out of their way, let them treat it like it's their own, and you'd be surprised the way they'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a saying I've said that if you're a good manager, that means when you leave, the organization actually will probably run better than when you're there. So,
I think that's happening
your
right
goal.
now with the new leadership change and everything. I think it's got a brighter future than, with me at the helm because, again, we all get set in our ways the older we get. And so
Yeah,
part of my
yeah.
success was realizing you've got to make changes.
Yep. Anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I just know for a lot of listeners out there, it's been a tough several years, and agriculture in general. It's been tough on us this year, but I do believe in this country. I do believe in where we're going, and I would keep the faith because we're keeping the faith, and we haven't backed off yet. And I want a place where farmers in this country can grow and feed ourselves, everybody in this country, and people outside of this country. And I just hope our government will help support that. We do need help, but farmers are going to do a better job, but we all got to do a better job of telling our story and understand just how important we are to this country.
Now, since this is the Top Producer Podcast, before I sign off, I should mention that you were a Top Producer of the Year. I'm trying to remember what year was that?
2017, I
Yeah,
believe.
yep. So I at least wanted to make sure, since this is the Top Producer Podcast, we need to at least let everybody
And
know that.
my plaque and my picture is over there on my wall, which is right in the center. That's probably one of my biggest highlights ever because we don't get a lot of praise and everything else. And for somebody else to honor you for your work and everything, that meant a whole lot to me. So
Yeah.
thank you to the Top Producer. And just again, it's one of those things we don't like the accolades and everything else like that, but it's nice to get something like that.
Yeah.
Treasured dearly.
Okay. Well, again, this is the Top Producer Podcast, and I'm Paul Neef, your host, signing off.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another new episode of the Top Producer Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember, all episodes are available on Farm Journal TV and anywhere podcasts are found.